All right, Danny. Here we are, man. We're live. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate
We're
it.
live. We're here. I'm excited.
I'm excited too, man. You are definitely one of the most active software developer content creators on the web right now, I think. Like LinkedIn, Twitter, you're all over the place, man. Maybe it's just because like I read your content and I'm always on there. Like, what's going on, huh?
You know, that's such a compliment, especially coming from you. I definitely try to stay active. I feel like, for me, it took hearing one time that I could be a developer that I changed my entire life. And I don't know who needs to hear that as well. So I try to make this message as widely accepted as possible because one person may hear it and they're like, you know what? I'm changing my life today. You never
Yeah,
know who that could be. I've
sure.
literally gotten messages daily from people saying, I was down and out and I saw
Yeah,
this post from you. I heard this talk from you. I heard you talk to me, or you were at an event that I was at and I'm back in it. Like, or I've
yeah,
talked to people where they're like, I couldn't get a job for years.
yeah,
And I took your advice and boom, I got
yeah,
my dream job in tech. So that's why I try to be as active as possible. I don't know who needs to hear it.
yeah. Absolutely. I'm still oops. I'm still getting used to this thing, so excuse me on the
You're
jumping
right.
around with this tool that you told me to use. So I'm so stoked on that. But I think what you're saying is so much of it resonates with the passion that you bring on your videos, and I think that also resonates in how you communicate anyway with your tweets or your posts anywhere. And I think that was something that really excited me about chatting with you as well. Is like, dude, this guy is just absolutely funneling a lot of people towards just making things happen. Perhaps that's software, but perhaps it's not. That's the other thing that I've really taken away from it is it's like, well, if it's not software, that's not a big deal. It's really just aggressively going after the things that you really, really want, which is really cool.
Yeah, I'm a very big believer in you need to know what it is that you want to go after, and it could be tech. Obviously, I talk about tech because I'm a developer, and I spent over 10 years frying chicken in the gas station. And for me, I say, if you know what you want, if you know your reason for being, if you know your purpose and your driving force, then nothing in the universe could stop you. But you need to identify that thing first. So whether it's tech, whether that's making cookies, whether that's frying chicken, whether that's, planting flowers, whatever it may be, you just need that reason. And once you have it, and it can't be a reason like, oh, I want to, get a paycheck. You get a paycheck from anywhere. That's not going to keep you where, but is it something like, oh, I want to, move from a bad neighborhood into a great neighborhood, or I want to own a house. I want to provide for my mother, my daughter, my father, my sister, my brother, my cousins, whoever it may be. That's a driving force. Or do I want to stop riding the bus and get into a car of my own? That's a driving force. These are the things that are going to take you where you want to go. And once you identify that, then the rest is history.
Danny, I'm pumped, dude. This is great. I'm really excited to have you. I totally agree with you, and I think the challenge that a lot of people have is just making the commitment to that instead of sticking into this like dream phase. Because even me, like I love dreaming about all of the possibilities of all sorts of things that I want to do, and sometimes it's just good to feel that. And beyond that, it's like really hard to do, like I got this stack of books that I want to read. And that's like a good example of this, where I've got this stack of books. I want to read them, but actually just buying the book made me feel good. So what is your recommendation on like overcoming that issue for me or for anybody else of like, you buy a course, you buy a book, like how do you actually get over that and start making progress?
It's an interesting thing, and I come across this a lot where people buy books, courses, and it's funny how, as of yet, I've not been asked in any interview I've ever done, how many courses do I own? No one has ever asked me that in a job interview. How many Udemy courses do you own? How many courses do you own? How many courses have you bought? What they do care about is the projects you complete. I would rather have you buy one course and actually complete it as opposed to buying 100 that you haven't even started yet. You saw the flash sale for $10 and you bought a bunch of crap that you never even opened. There's people that I know to this day that bought courses over a year ago they've never started. What's the purpose in that? Does it make you feel good? Why does it make you feel good if no progress has been made from that? I would rather, here's the thing. Money comes and goes. I don't care about money. Millionaires lose money all the time. Money means nothing. It'll go. If you want money, I'll give you money. I don't care. You want my clothes? I'll literally give you the shirt I'm wearing right now. I don't care. Your skill set is your ATM. And if you increase it, it will produce for you. Increase your skills and it will produce. I would rather you buy one course and increase your skill set, increase the value in there, learn something, and then produce with it as opposed to buying 10 that you never even look at again. Because what's the value? Like, you're literally throwing away money and getting no return on it. At least if you learn something, there's a tangible return off of that. Why waste money and get no return off of it?
Yeah, I honestly think it's you feel good. Like you're buying the feeling sometimes and not really buying the action. And that's 100%. Actually a big part of the reason why my website for a really long time was just a membership site. So the reason it's a membership site, it's reoccurring. That means that every month I'm knocking on your door, or every year, to do more. And if you're not doing more, you know that. And it's like I'm putting you on the hook to do that. So that's part of the reason I did that myself. But let's switch gears a little bit. I actually want to know about this journey of yours working in a gas station. And like, how is it that, I mean, because I've been in gas stations a lot. Obviously, everyone has, if you have a car, even if you don't. And you go in there, never, and honestly, I have to be very upfront about this. Is like, I've never walked into one and go, that guy's going to be a software developer soon. So you must have experienced that a lot while you were learning, while you were doing these things. What was all that like?
So for me, I have a PhD in frying chicken. I did it for over 10 years. If you're trying to gain weight, I can help you do it. I cook the best fried chicken around. Okay. And there's no one that can touch me. And for over 10 years, that was my ceiling. That was my limit. That was it. Like, that was the extent of what I could achieve. And
was this a belief that you had in that at that time, or was this more like from culturally or from your friends or family? Like, everyone's like, oh yeah, that's what Danny does. He's frying chicken.
I grew up in the most humblest of beginnings, and I thought this was the best that I could do. I never went to college. I didn't have that luxury. I wanted to. I didn't have that option. I'm the oldest of 9 siblings, so we had no money. I had to earn. The reason why I even moved to Memphis, Tennessee from Brooklyn, New York, my mother had cancer. She came here for treatment. I came to earn money for the family. Yeah. There was no other option for me. I thought I'm working 80 plus hours a week. When my son was born, I was working 102 hours a week, and I was still just making enough money to call myself broke. I was just meeting that criteria, but it was it was all I knew. And my wife would always tell me, that you're made for something better, but that ceiling was there for me. And I saw this, and I was literally at a fork in the road, and I said, okay, I'm 30 years old. If I go right, I'm going to be in this gas station until the day I die. Or if I go left, I'm going to make a change, and I don't know what the change is, but it's going to be now, and it has to be now. And it was at this time where I saw an interview. A rapper had invested several $1 million into a tech company, and he was asked why he invested this money. He said, well, I'm learning how to code. Now, this blew my mind because I never knew someone like me from my kind of background could ever learn how to code. My honest to God belief was coding was for the PhDs and the rocket scientists of the world. There was no average human being that knew how to code. And so I'm like, whoa, he's learning how to code. And the reasoning was profound. Obviously, he's not learning how to code because he's like, oh, I'm going to, give up this lucrative rap career to become a developer. That wasn't happening, right? So why are you investing?
Who was the rapper? Who's the rapper?
It was will.i.am.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. And so I said, so why is he learning how to code? Like, the reasoning makes so much sense to me. It's like, why wouldn't you want to understand how the thing that you touch 90% out of your day operates? Like, we have a basic understanding of our bodies, right? If I'm sick, I know either A, I'm not going to make it, I need to go see a doctor, or B, I could ride this out. I'll drink some Dayquil, some Robitussin, I'll be A-okay, right? Or if my car makes a weird sound, I'm like, oh, that's not normal. I need to take this to a mechanic. So why don't I have the same basic understanding with my computer? Like, why is the extent of my knowledge literally opening up YouTube.com and watching cat videos? Like, why don't I know more? Like, what is RAM? What is Snapdragon? It's all buzzwords until you put something behind it. So he started learning how to code, and so did I. And I got on freecodecamp.org. And I started learning, and I started growing. And I heard about this thing called meetups. And I go to my first meetup, and at that time, it was like basically, in a nutshell, I made an application where you enter the URL of an image, and it returns that image with some coloring on top. It's like a really, really, really bad filter, right? But it's safe to say at this point in my life, I could cure cancer with code, right? I'm that good. No, it's terrible. But I walk into this meetup, and I instantly realize that I don't know shit. I don't know stuff. I don't know anything. Literally, people are saying words to me. It's like a foreign language, like C#, Java, SQL, and I don't know what any of this means because I thought the world began and ended at JavaScript. But now I'm hooked. I've been introduced to this brand new breadth of knowledge that I didn't know existed, and so I leave that meetup because I realized I've been excluded from the conversation, and I said, I will never be excluded again. So I go home and I start learning more and more. I start learning about JavaScript and ES6 functions. And I literally go to that next meetup like, do you know how to do an error function? Do you know this? Do you know that? And I go to the next meetup, I start learning more and more, and I learn about SQL. And I'm like, do you know how to SQL table? Do you know a SQL query? And then I go to the next meetup, I start learning more and more, and I learn about Java. And I'm like, do you know how to do this in Java? Do you know what Spring Framework is? And now I've been introducing and welcomed into this amazing community of developers that just want to help as many people as they can. And from there, I took off, and I kind of asked the one question that everybody asks at a meetup: how do you get the first job in tech? And everyone said the same answer over and over again, like, oh, that's the hardest thing. Oh, if you get the first job, everyone after that is easier. But to me, that's the worst answer you could ever tell someone like me. Because not only did you give me 0 action items to work on, you've demotivated and demoralized me and made me question what I've been doing for the last 6 months, but I have no way to get from A to B, from X to Y. And so I realized in that moment that there's all these Fortune 500 employees and hiring managers at companies, and they're all on LinkedIn. And I said, how do I get in contact with them? And I created a LinkedIn profile, start cold calling and cold messaging hiring managers. Because I realized in that moment, the chances of one of them walking into the gas station I work at is 0. So if they say no, I will literally never see them in real life. I will never have to be face to face with them again. The only way I will meet them is if they invite me to their company. So I just started cold calling. In the beginning, they're like, who the hell is this Danny guy? And now they're like, oh, I love Danny. I knew Danny from the beginning. Danny is awesome. But it never would have happened if I didn't send that first message.
So there's a couple things to unpack here. First of all, how are you going to these meetups while you're working like crazy at these gas stations, right? How do you even find time to do that? Now, luckily, we have a lot more live things like this. But at that time, and also how long ago was that?
So I started coding at 30. I started learning how to code at 30. I'm 33 now. But I literally would take off from work on certain days where there's a meetup, and I would work just up until that time, and then I'll drive straight to that meetup. And for a long time, my nickname was Popeyes, because I would walk into these meetups, and after being there for a bit, the entire room would smell like chicken because I've been frying chicken all day. And to be honest, it instilled a lot of imposter syndrome in me as well. Even though I knew I was actively learning, I said, I'm not on the same level as these people that work at these tech companies. I'm less than. I'm not on an equal playing field as these people that are having college degrees or working in office environments, because these fingers literally bred chicken. But now they tap dance on a keyboard and I make 6 figures, and that's A-okay. But before, I would doubt myself because I was the butt of the joke. Oh, Popeyes is here. But it wasn't until I actually believed in myself and said, just keep going, because you could be Popeyes today, but you'll be tech guy tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, I think I have a similar sort of background in the sense that I was working at restaurants. I wasn't cooking necessarily, but I studied business in college. I didn't study computer science at all. I didn't study coding, and I just decided one day that I was going to learn it, and I just took the time, similar to you. But that imposter syndrome thing, that is real. I think everyone who's successful in software development that didn't start when they were 10 or 12 or, when they were pretty young, has that feeling, right? I think it's very, very common, as well as even people that are building content, stuff like that. I mean, I would imagine that was a very similar leap for you from not only learning it, but then starting to teach it. Is that correct?
Oh, 100%. I've yet to meet a developer at any stage in their career that hasn't had imposter syndrome. We all talk about it because it's so real. I remember in like the beginning when I started learning, because I've always been like kind of like a quiet person. I know it's hard to tell right now, but I've always been a quiet person, and I taught myself how to speak like this in front of people.
I don't believe you. There's no way.
You would be shocked. But I taught myself how to speak like this. But I honestly, like, I remember when I heard about imposter syndrome in the beginning, I was like, what a load of bull. Like, this is stuff that people just try to talk about to have something to talk about. And then when it hit me, I'm like, maybe I need to quit this. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. And I realized that, wow, this hits so many, like, I've had so many incredible mentors that, like, I've had mentors that work in Microsoft and all these places, and literally they're all like, yeah, the imposter syndrome is so real. And it is. And I think when you know where imposter syndrome derives from, that is when you can control it. Imposter syndrome is the fear of not being good enough. It is the fear of being exposed, and it is the fear of how you will react in that situation. So it's not even the fear that you don't know enough. It's the fear of, if someone approaches me with this, how am I going to react to this? And so for me, the biggest thing is knowing where it stems from. So right now, for me, I still get imposter syndrome all the time. And it really, anytime I have a code review, like, I'm like, okay, that's it. Today's the day they realize I can't code for nothing. Like, I'm losing my job today. And I'm like, why? Why do I have this? I've been employed at this company for a couple years now. I've proven myself. I've literally gotten awards. I've been promoted 3 times. Why do I still feel this? And basically now I've become best friends with imposter syndrome. I know it's there. It knows I'm here, and we don't get in each other's way. And when a code review comes up and my anxiety starts going up, I'm like, oh, well, it's because I have a code review. I know I belong here. I don't need to be dissuaded. And now I can control how it controls me. And here's the other thing with that. Imposter syndrome stops a lot of people from asking or going forward to get opportunities. And one thing that I realized about myself and about others is, how many opportunities in life have you lost simply because you didn't open your mouth? And are you willing to allow that to keep being the perpetual thing that exists in your life? Like, are you willing to lose 1,000 more opportunities in your life just because you didn't say, I'm interested? Here's the thing. A lot of people, you have the skills, no doubt. You've got the abilities, no doubt. No one knows you exist. And until you actually get out of your shell and say, hi, I'm here, they don't know that they can offer this to you. So why not open your mouth and say, hey, I'm more than capable to do this. Can we have a conversation? And I guarantee you, just by doing that one thing, you'll see yourself go from level 1 to level 2 almost instantly.
Interesting. I wonder the other side of this, though. And that is somebody who's overly confident. They've done one tutorial and they're like, oh, yes, I am now a master JavaScript programmer. I control my destiny. I go into an interview and they're like, sorry, you don't really know that much. It's like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, how do you actually advise that person to take a step back and be like, challenging at least their own baseline assumptions of what the opposite would be,
This is such a good question, and I never get asked something like this, but I have like the perfect story for this. And the problem is,
I figured you would, Danny.
You know why? So when I was learning how to code, I didn't know that there was anything past JavaScript. It was before I went to a meetup or anything. And I had saw that people were like, just start applying to jobs. Like, just start now. And so I had just started learning JavaScript, right? Just started. And I was applying to jobs, and I actually got a phone call back from one, and I was going to do a phone interview. And so we're on the phone, and I'm super excited. I even dressed up for the phone interview. They can't see me, but I'm like, I'm dressing for the part I want, right? Like, this is going to make me get this thing. And so we're having this conversation.
Wait, hold on. Why did you dress up for a phone interview?
It was the mentality. I was like, okay, dress for the part you want, and maybe like that confidence will come from being dressed up, and maybe like my voice will sound different because I feel like I'm in the mode or something. I don't know what the logic was.
Do you get like, do you pump yourself up before these things too? Like, is there something that you do that, like, you know, like beating your chest or standing tall like that TED Talk? You know what I mean?
No, I don't do anything like that. But I will say, especially for like my very, very first tech interview, like you know how people have like butterflies in their stomach? I had helicopters. Like it was all over the place. Like I was nervous beyond nervous. And I was like, okay, I don't know if this is going to be real or not. But I remember in that interview within like the first 5 minutes, they're like, all right, tell me about yourself. And I was like, I've been learning how to code. I work in a gas station, la da da da. And they're like, well, do you know JavaScript? I was like, yeah, I know JavaScript. I'm working in JavaScript and I'm making a project with JavaScript right now. Like I know JavaScript. And at this time, like, I barely knew what an array was, right? And so they're like, well, do you know React? And I was like, yeah, I know how to React. Happy, sad, mad. What are you talking about? I was so new in JavaScript, I didn't know what a framework was. I didn't get that far in Free Code Camp. And you could audibly hear like, oh, this was going to be an hour interview. It's going to be 5 minutes now. Like, we're about to wrap this up. You're not even at the level to be talking to us. But it was a great moment for me because I realized how much more I had to learn to be viable and profitable in this field. I think a lot of people say like, oh, if you just know the bare minimum, you can get a job. And I think that's disingenuous. It may work for a handful of people, but if you do the bare minimum, don't be shocked by the results. And I feel like a lot of people are coming into this, and I talk to people constantly with like, oh man, I've been doing this for so long. And nothing's happening. This isn't for everybody. This doesn't work out. And I was even talking to one guy who's like, man, I've been trying to get a job for 6 years and it still hasn't happened. And I'm like, okay, my first 2 questions are, how is your LinkedIn and what does your portfolio site look like? Because I have 4 steps to getting a job and those are one of the first 2. So how's your LinkedIn and what's your portfolio site? And you look at the LinkedIn, it's terrible. You look at the portfolio site, it looks like it was made literally like using MS Paint. And I'm like, would you hire somebody with this kind of portfolio site? Like, you've been doing this for 6 years, and this is what you have to show? For 6 years, I'd imagine you to be very proficient in React or JavaScript or whatever it may be that you've been learning. But if this is what you're bringing, 6 years is not showing that you've spent any time on this. Or was it 6 years ago you started a tutorial, then you stopped, then a year later you went back, and then you stopped? Be honest with yourself. And I think a lot of us, we don't do that. And again, I always say this, it's very important to prioritize yourself. I think as humans, but also as parents or people that care about others, we have this tendency to put others first and we neglect ourselves. And so then we start digging this hole that we can't get out of where we're like, well, this isn't for me. It's going to be for somebody else. And it's just not me. Be honest with yourself. If you know, like I talk to people all the time, like, yeah, well, I don't know this. Well, you just identified your problem. So if you don't know it, let's go find out and research this and learn this, right? That's what development is. Learning the things you know nothing about and then overcoming that obstacle. 95% of my job at work is literally, I have no idea how this works. I've never seen this code a day in my life. It is broken and I've been thrown this ticket, so now I have to work on this. That's development. Keep breaking things until you fix it.
Yeah. So much of it, including getting jobs or getting noticed, is being willing to be uncomfortable with the challenges that you face, right? And actually, I have, this happens to me all the time, and I hear this a lot as well, that, oh, I don't know how to do this, or, this is too hard. How do I actually solve this? For me, one of the biggest tips I have for somebody who's actually struggling to get through a tutorial is switch, do a different one. I don't think you should stick with something that's just not sticking with you. Right. So like I did Ruby on Rails for a really long time and I was really trying to make it work. I was super discouraged because it just wasn't connecting with me. Then I switched over to Python and it just absolutely connected and I just took off from there. Right. It sounds like something like that happened with you for JavaScript because JavaScript is one of those things that happens for a lot of people. But actually getting to the point where you know when to switch, I think that's the hardest thing as well, or one of the hardest things when you're learning, is because what's actually happening? Are you getting discouraged because this part is kind of hard and you just need to push through? Or is it the wrong programming language for you to start with that's really going to hook you in? Like, how do you go out about and approach that specifically? I mean, or did you even really do that, or was it really just JavaScript for you, and it just you got sucked in and you're there?
So for me, and I think this is important, I don't believe any language is the best. I love every single language. I love every single framework. I love it all. I'm a problem solver.
Absolutely.
I will learn any language to solve a problem if that is the correct tool to use. So for me, like, I like JavaScript, but like, I found my calling with Java, and that's how I got my first job, was with Java, actually.
Okay.
What happened was I spent 4 months learning Python, and I loved Python. But in Memphis, Tennessee, there are absolutely 0 jobs in Python. And I didn't know that until 4 months in, when I started applying for jobs, because I was making projects and I was using Django and Flask, and I was learning all this cool stuff, and I was building stuff with it.
So wait, let me understand the timeline here. Then you started with Python, jumped over to JavaScript, and then to Java,
No.
and then
So I started with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript because that's the free code camp path.
sure.
And then I saw the stat, like the number one most hireable language in the country, and this is a fact, is Python.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you consider things like not just development, but data science and using R and things like that. But Python is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most number one in demand language in America. And so I was like, oh, well, surely, like, that's exactly what I need to learn. And as I started learning and started applying for jobs, I was like, oh, there is no option for that in Memphis. And I said, well, if I get a job somewhere else, is it viable to have my wife quit her job and then move my wife and my son and myself to another location where we don't have, sell our house, do all this stuff? And I was like, it's just not possible. So I found, and this is me being stubborn, Memphis is like a C# town. But I realized I want to focus on just a couple companies that I actually want to work on. And so I started.
The funniest thing about, doesn't Memphis have a lot of roots in music as well?
Yeah.
So it has C#. Isn't that a musical note? That's kind of funny.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah. Anyways,
Because we even have like a Microsoft office here and all that good stuff. But for the most part, like, we do like a lot of enterprise level applications. We are home for some of the largest global headquarters in the world, like FedEx, for example. They're major, and they're a huge tech employer here. But like, I think they have like thousands of developers, but like, they're here, they're set here. AutoZone has their global corporation here. Like, all these major companies are here. And so like, they have a lot of their tech talent here. But I wanted to work for just a few companies in particular, and I found that they use Java. And that's when I was like, all right, that's exactly what I'm going to learn. And I'm glad it worked out, because if it didn't, this would be a rags to rags story, not rags to riches. But luckily for me, it worked. But the problem was, I'm very stubborn. And I realized I'm depressed in this gas station. I don't want to trade one depression for another. I want to be happy if I'm changing my life. And I'm not going to start that happiness by being upset with what I want. Now, I don't advise that for everybody. Again,
Sure.
I'm stubborn and stupid. But you can do whatever you want to do. Because, again, only 10 companies in Memphis use Java. So if it didn't work out, this would be a really bad scenario. And I would have been better off theoretically and statistically learning C#.
Danny, I don't know if I agree with you on that it wouldn't have worked out because of Memphis, right? We live in the internet age, man. You could have worked for any company anywhere in the world, especially now with the remote stuff and COVID
100% now.
But even then, so within the last 3 years, I promise you, with your energy, with your go get it, your pig-headed discipline, like, you definitely would have been able to find something. So I think it would have worked out. And this goes to like other people as well. One of the things that you said I thought was really interesting was you found companies that you wanted to work for, and they picked Java, and that's what you went after. That to me is like, oh, that's perfect. That's great advice, because I get this question a lot too. It's like, how do I work for company X, Y, or Z? And it's like, well, take a look at what they're hiring for and learn that. Prove to them over and over, because you might not get the job right away. It might take 3 years to get your dream job. Wow, that's crazy. That's not really that long even.
Nope.
People go to college. Like, I mean, think about a doctor goes to college for like 10 years to get their dream job, right? So they go to university and all that. So for you picking that's like one of those key nuggets that I think a lot of people should understand is, I agree with you on the programming languages. Just pick one that you enjoy, you like, but it doesn't actually matter, right? You just need to figure out one that's actually going to push you forward and allow you to keep finding. If you're looking for a job, then do that. If you're not looking for a job, if you're looking to start your own project, just make a bunch of projects, right? Like you make a bunch of projects over time, eventually all of those projects you can create will either turn into a business that you run or a job opportunity or a lot of job opportunities. So I guess the biggest question now, Danny, is like, where do you go from you get your first job and you go through the interview process? Ideally, I would imagine you nailed it, but how do you even prep for that interview process? Like, what is it that you're trying to figure out when it comes to sitting down with someone who's ideally an expert in that role and they're hiring for you? What do you do for that?
So just a couple things I want to touch on, and I will answer that question because that's a good question. So I think the idea comes from where people are like, man, this is taking forever. Like, here's something you need to understand as far as getting a job. Like, if it takes you 1.5 years to land a job, is it really that long? Like, think about that for a second. To get even a bachelor's degree, right? And when you get a bachelor's degree in computer science, you still don't know how to code. So people graduate and then spend 6 months learning how to code to get a job. But it took you 1.5 years. Did it really take that long? Or 2 years or 3 years? You still save time. It doesn't matter how long it takes you to get there as long as you get there. Because here's the thing, I work with a phenomenal human being. It took him 6 years to land his first job in tech. It took me 8 months, if people want to know. So on his job title, it doesn't say took 6 years to become a software developer. It says no, software developer. For me, it says software developer. Our titles are the same, our paychecks are the same, our benefits are the same. So it doesn't matter that it took me quicker to get there and took him longer. It doesn't make him any less of a developer. Our skills are what dictate our pay and our desire to be in this industry. Simple as that. And I think a big thing with this is everyone advertised like, become a developer in 3 months, 90 days to become a software developer. And I'm like, I'm sure that's possible for like a handful of people, but that show 90 Day Fiance? They couldn't get a fiance in 90 days. You're going to get a brand new career with 6 figures in 90 days? Like, be realistic on your expectations, but I guarantee you, if you stay on the path, you're going to get exactly where you want to go. Now, for me, I had multiple job offers when I got my first job in tech. I turned down 6 job offers before accepting my first. A lot of people think that I'm crazy when I say that, but again, it goes back to the same idea. I had a very clear vision of what I wanted. And I actually stopped like a couple interviews halfway in the middle because I realized, this isn't it. I had a couple things that I was really looking for, and some companies just didn't have it. And I wasn't trying to accept something that I didn't want. And I think it comes from, number one, controlling the interview, which I talk about a lot. Number two, it really comes from knowing what you can bring to the table and bringing that. A lot of people, when they go into these interviews, they're like, I just need a chance. Give me a chance. I'm begging for a chance. Give me a chance. It's almost like a human reaction when someone's begging you for something. You're like, I don't want to deal with this, right? You're not coming across as a valuable candidate when you do that. Or even when you say, I'll work for free. Let me get a job. I'll work for free. You're not coming across as valuable. Instead, walk in these interviews with a value mindset. I am valuable. I will bring value to this team. If you give me the opportunity to showcase this, I will bring value to this company, and I'll bring so much value that you're going to end up falling in love with me. I guarantee you, if you bring value, they'll bring a checkbook. It's as simple as that. No company in the history of the world has ever turned down a surefire bet to make money. So I'd go into these interviews, and I'd use my 4 steps to landing a job in tech. And if you want to land any job in tech, there's 4 steps that I have, especially when you don't have experience. Number one, you have to have a very strong LinkedIn profile. There's no way around it. 90 million monthly users on LinkedIn are hiring managers, recruiters, and decision makers for businesses. They're the ones that are making the decisions on who's getting a job and who's not. And I definitely go into a lot of detail on that, like one of my last YouTube videos. You can check it out. But that process alone, will get you so many jobs. But number two, you have to have a good portfolio site. Now, it doesn't have to be technical savvy. You don't need to do a lot of code there. Most hiring managers have never written a line of code a day in their life. They don't know what code looks like. They've just been given a job description that they got to fill. But it does have to be aesthetically pleasing. Meaning, on a subliminal level, if a hiring manager goes to your website, they're like, this looks nice. They can trust that site. And that's the site that gets passed on to the decision maker of the role. And that's where step 3 comes in, your portfolio items. You don't need to have 50 items on there, but you do need to have 1 or 2 projects on there that are big that you can talk about in an interview and control the narrative of that interview with them. Step number 4, you have to have a good resume because you got to make it through ATS and you have to have something to pass over. But like one way to control the interview that I've always used, for example, let's say I'm an interview and they're like, well, do you know SQL? I could say, yes, I know SQL, and most people will say that. But instead, I could say something like, yeah, I know SQL because I actually created an application that separates city data names and it classifies them as urban and rural. And I use a SQL tables to do that. But I use Java on the back end pulling that API, and I display the information on the front with Angular. I've just given them 3 points that I'm very strong at: Angular, SQL, Java. They're not going to go further down their predestined set of questions now because they're like, oh, what does that project do? How did you make that API work? Like, what did you use here? Did you use Spring Framework? Did you use Angular? Now I've got them where I want them on my strong suits, as opposed to them maybe asking, well, do you know .NET or something else? Now I can control the narrative, and if I hit them enough times with the right answer, I'll make them get knocked out in love with me. And then that's when they're offering me the positions and the jobs that I want.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I haven't had a lot of experience with is the actual code review process in an interview or a whiteboard session. Is that something you've come across very much? Or and if you have, it's typically done by a technical interviewer, right? It's not a hiring manager that's never done anything, so they actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so
right?
Normally, whiteboard coding, that's not going to be interview 1. That's like 2 or 3. But definitely did a lot of whiteboard coding. And there's no way around it. You need to know what you need to know. And your job is to get past the gatekeeper, the one that's deciding whether you can even show off your skills or not. And the way you're going to do that is by having something to talk about. But I see a question in the chat that is relevant to what we're talking about now is, how does a self-taught developer get a good resume with 0 experience? And the way that works is, you need to quantify, and this actually applies to LinkedIn as well, but you need to quantify your achievements. One thing that I see common all the time, number 1, people treat the resume like it's an autobiography. It's not. Your LinkedIn is not your autobiography either. This is your fishing line. This is your hook. This is what you use to pique curiosity to where they're like, I need to find out more about this person. The problem is, especially when it comes to job experience, I don't care where you've worked right now. You say PharmD techie, maybe you work at a pharmacist and you work at a pharmacy. Like, what have you done? Like, you've had a job for several years, right? What have you done besides the basic job requirements? Because a lot of people, when they put their job, they're like, well, I did this at the job. Like, I had to work at a cash register because I was a cashier. I had to fry chicken because I was a fried chicken person. But quantify, like, what have you done? You've been there for years. You've done something to where your boss was like, oh, I'm keeping them around. What was it? Did you save a client some money? Did you help speed up the process? Did you help reduce spoilage at your job? Did you help reduce turnover? Did you help increase profitability? Like, what did you do? Explain an achievement. Did you get employee of the month? What did you do to actually say, I was here for a long period of time. I've done something that my higher ups were proud of me. Explain that, because it doesn't matter if you have tech experience. You should be explaining the achievements that you've done. Explain your wins. But also, one thing that I recommend for a lot of beginners is, before your job experience, explain one project that you did. And in there, obviously list the languages that you use that'll help you match keywords in your job process and all the good stuff for the ATS. But make sure you're talking about, this is something I did, but now here's my job experience and then my education and so on and so forth. But quantify all of this. Don't just say, I rang up customers. Well, you're a cashier. I assume that you did that. If you didn't do that, that would be a bigger question, right? Don't tell me, like, one thing I see all the time is like, oh, I'm a motivated employee. Like, I assume you're a motivated employee. Like, these are assumptions that I'm going to make. You don't need to tell me that. Give me something good. Tell me something good.
Yeah. And I mean, I think along these lines, if you have 0 experience, literally 0 experience, make a project and post it on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Craigslist. Actually make a project that other people can use and start to gain some experience. Now you're like, oh, well, that costs money. Well, there's a lot of hosting services out there that don't cost money, even if the URL isn't the one that you want, right?
Netlify, Heroku, Firebase. Like, these are all great examples for free, and you just need to have a working link.
I mean, Linode rather gives $100 credit for every new customer, right? So there you go. Google Cloud Platform, $300. Like, there's a lot of really, really good options to start with zero experience. And to me, I think you should build up. One aspect I would add to this is build up your GitHub profile and actually build real projects that anyone who's technical would be able to pull down this project and actually run it. So have it actually work to where, even if it's small, even if it's a calculator with a React application or something like that, whatever it is, I think you need to just prove that you have this experience, and like what Danny said, actually have it quantifiable so you can list off some numbers. A lot of business people, a lot of managers are all about the numbers that you can actually prove. Like if you're a cashier, I've served 5,000 customers in a year. Oh, well, what do normal cashiers do? Oh, they do about 2,000. How'd you do 5,000? There you go. Now you have a whole new talk, and you could be at any level. So for me, when I was waiting tables, I could literally wait on about 12 tables. I had help from bussers and some other people, but 12 tables, if you've ever waited tables or had a server that's waiting 12 tables, you'll realize they either are really good at their job, they work really hard, or they're just way over their head. Sometimes I was way over my head. Sometimes I was really, really, just really in the zone and good at my job. But the average person would actually serve maybe 3 tables at that restaurant, maybe 4. So being able to do 12, that means I was just like super dialed in, and I could do it for a few hours straight. And the reason I would do those things is because, number one, my managers all believed in me at the time. They're like, oh yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. So let's give him more tables. He can handle it. No big deal.
Yeah.
And number two, I wanted to be out of there. I didn't want to be a waiter anymore. So I was like, dude, I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can to get out of there. The reason I even went to work at restaurants in the first place was, yes, to earn money, quick money, but also to work in off hours. So during the day I could work on startups and stuff like that. And I think it's similar to you, Danny, where you were wanting to get this thing happening. So you actually worked you stayed at the gas station, but then you started carving out time for the things that you were actively trying to do. And I started with zero experience. You started with zero experience. We all have. So it's just a matter of taking those little steps and just committing to it. To me, one of the biggest things that I'm still trying to do is putting everything that I want to accomplish in a habit, like making it a habit versus making it based off of motivation, right? So motivation is fleeting. Habits happen every day. A really good book for this is called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm not surprised that you know of this, but the idea of this also being with your learning or trying to get a job. One of the things my dad's taught me when I was really young is the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? So if you are not annoying, like squeaky wheels are annoying for sure, but if you're not annoying, but you're persistent and you're like, hey, I really want to work at this company, even if it's Google or the company down the street, if you are actively proving yourself to them, as in you go in there, you get some questions, you get some feedback, you're like, hey, I really want to work here. How do I do that? That's a really good question for almost anyone to answer, right? Because they will sometimes give you the answer. Sometimes they won't even acknowledge you, but if you do that enough over time, they're going to start to know who you are, especially as you said, Danny, you provide value to them. And what one of the things that you can do is just prove time and time again that you're leveling up your skills. So even if you don't get that job that you really want now, and you get it in 5 years, but in that time period, you're working at this smaller company and you're building your skills there. And then you go to another company, build a whole different kinds of skills. Like those are kind of things that I think are just absolutely critical for moving forward. But it all comes back down to making it in as a habit and not based off of motivation. Because Danny, you and I are incredibly motivated guys, and we want to make things happen. But I can't imagine that you're always like above the moon motivated. There's got to be times where you're down and you're like, man, I just don't feel like doing anything. In those cases, what do you do? How do you actually overcome this you're in the dumps and you're just not moving forward? How do you do that?
So, like, you've touched on several things that I love, and I'll say this, people are always, and like you just said, now you're super motivated. I'm not really that motivated. I'm just driven. And for me, motivation comes and goes with the wind. You watch a motivational video for 20, 30, 40 minutes. You feel like you conquer the world, and you're back to normal, right?
But what's the difference? What's the difference between? Oh, you're about to say it, huh?
Yeah.
Driven and motivation. Okay.
Yeah. So being driven means I have to do this. If something is a priority, that is something that you're going to do and achieve no matter what. For me, going to work is I have to do this. It's a priority. Whether I have, like, if I feel like it or not, there are days that we all wake up like, man, I really don't want to be at work today. But you go to work because this is a priority. Spending time with my family, that's a priority. I have to do this. I have to spend time with my family. I have to go to work. I have to make sure that I'm learning this. When I have to do something, that's something that's going to be done. The problem is we all have these goals like, man, I wish I could become a developer. And then there's no action behind it. But now if you say, I have to become a developer, I must become a developer, I'm going to become a developer, I have to do this, I'm going to actively take these steps and say, okay, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. And whether I feel like it or not, I'm actually going to make that step happen. So now my drive kicks in, meaning I don't want to really do this today. I don't feel like coding today. I don't feel like getting out of bed. Well, guess what? I have to. And once I have to do something, it's going to be done. If you make something a priority, that's something that you're actually going to do. As opposed to just saying, it would be nice, the what ifs. Don't allow your woulda, shoulda, couldas, the what ifs to control whether you do something or not. Do it. Simple as that. And I know it seems like, oh, well, it's nice to say, no. Really think about this for a second. Like people that work out all the time. It's not like, oh, I love going to the gym. There's days they hate the gym. There's days they don't want to work out. There's days they don't want to be an athlete, right? But they go because they have to go. They've made this habit. They've made this a viable, important thing in their day. They do that more than they would eat a meal or something else. Like it has to be done. If you prioritize it, it's going to get done. So for me, there's plenty of times, everyone thinks I'm crazy. I start my days at 4:00 in the morning every morning, right? And it started when I was working at the gas station because when I was learning how to code, I would work, 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day sometimes. And I'd get home. I was bone tired. I was tired in my bones. And I'd be learning things. And I felt like I was studying the exact same thing 7, 8 times just to retain it. And like it was barely sticking, right? I was just so tired. And so what I started doing then was I started waking up 2:30 in the morning to study before work. I had to be at work at 5. So I started studying from 2:30 to like 4:30 and then head out the door. But what I realized is my brain is fresh and it's almost absorbing everything the first time around without me having to relearn it again. And I was like, whoa, I found out something about myself here. And so now, to this day, I wake up at 4:00 in the morning. My family wakes up at 7. So that gives me 3 hours of me time. That is time that is dedicated to myself. I don't do anything work related, but I have a lot of goals that I'm working on. And so between my computer, which is right here, obviously, and my TV, which is behind here, I have a wall and I physically write down all of my goals and I place it on my wall. And so that way, if I'm about to binge watch some Netflix on the TV, like I'm facing my goals and I'll look at it and I'm like, well, have I done enough to get to this? If the answer is yes, man, I'm about to binge watch the hell out of a show, right? But if the answer is no, I'd be like, you know what? Instead of watching the 10 episodes I'm about to watch now, I'm going to watch 2. I'm still going to enjoy myself. And I'm going to spend the other 8 hours trying to make a better version of myself and trying to get to where I want to go. And that is how I create my time to go towards what's necessary. Because for me, my goal, and I know my goals are different than a lot of people are like, I just want to become a developer, which is fantastic. For me, my goals are a lot higher. I've helped over 70 people land their first jobs in tech. I've helped several hundred more online land their first jobs in tech as well. I want to 10x those numbers. I'm not going to be able to do that unless I'm putting forth effort. I want to help change lives. I want to make generational rifts. And the only way that I'm going to do that is by literally basically digging up someone's family tree and placing it in a better area, right? Only way I can do that is if I'm putting forth enough effort. I don't monetize any of this. I don't want to make money from this. I just want to help people. And whatever way I can do that is the way I'm going to do that.
That's awesome, man. I really like that. What shows are you watching?
I don't know.
Quite a left-hand turn, but I'm curious.
Right now, I'm hooked on Fargo. I don't know if you've ever seen that show. Season 4 right now is with Chris Rock, and I was like, this is gonna be trash. And it's basically talking about this time in history where the mafia and all that was running into the black gangs that were uprising. and they're going at it, and I thought it was gonna be really bad, and I'm like, this is like the best thing that I've ever seen, and it's got mixed reviews, but it's phenomenal. I'm loving that. I was all about
season 1 was great. I really liked season 1. I don't remember. I don't recall season 2 or 3. So
you're not missing much there.
Yeah,
but season 4 came back swinging.
Yeah.
But
do you watch The Boys or Witcher?
Yeah, The Boys, Witcher. I'm into all, and what's funny is I'm not really like a superhero fan at all. Like I'm not into superheroes. No? But The Boys is so different. Like I'm not into, and I know this is taboo to say in tech, but like I'm not into the Avengers and all that stuff. Like that's not. I can't get into like that fantastical nature. I need things to be real. And so, I love the story of like
boys and Witcher aren't exactly real. But,
well, I mean, so Witcher, I'll say like I like the story plot a lot, and it's not the fantasy thing kind of loses me, but I like the struggles he goes through and the ways he tries to rectify them. I like that. But The Boys, like that's like it's superheroes, but it's really not. Like there's so much more to that. Yeah. But it seems so outfit. Yeah.
It seems like it's almost like celebrities and everyone else.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like a lot, where like Homelander is like, I mean, who you could imagine a bunch of celebrities being very similar to that guy. And you're just like, who is that? And who's this fake guy that's in front of everybody that everyone really likes, but he's actually a monster behind the scenes. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I really like that. I like shows that drop the veil. And here's the thing. I'm a realist, right? Like, so a lot of people come to me with problems, and I don't really like sugarcoating things. I like telling you exactly how it is, because, and some people are like, well, you could probably say this in a different way where it wouldn't like come across as harsh or something. But I feel like when I'm brutally honest with somebody, they're going to take action right then and there to fix it.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, so many people have told people like, oh, your portfolio site is awesome. And then I'll look at it, I'll be like, there's a lot of issues here. And they're like, what do you mean there's a lot of issues? Everyone says it's awesome. Well, I'm telling you what's wrong with it. And once they fix it, like, dude, I just got a job. I'm like, that's the problem with sugarcoating stuff. When you sugarcoat something, people eat it instead of looking at it, right? I'd rather tell you the brutally honest truth. Maybe it hurts your feelings for 5 seconds, then you fix it, and now you feel like you're king of the world. And shows that do the same thing I'm really into, where they don't create this like facade or masquerade behind it, a random idea, but it's like real life. Like these are people that are struggling, but they're still making it. Instead of like, I hate the story like where it's like, oh, this guy won the lottery. Like that's not a story. You know, people gravitate to that, but it's not real life. Like where's the stories? Where's the amplification of the blue collar worker that makes it and buys a house for their family? That's a good story. But more people are like, oh, this guy won $10 million and this is his life now. I'm not into that.
Pursuit of Happiness. Did you see that movie? Will Smith?
That's a damn good movie. I think we all know that.
Yeah. And in the story, even that's a true story, obviously. And I heard that story. I think it was on like something called Chicken Soup for the Soul when I was like 12 years old, 10 years old, something like that. The audio tapes. I'm not sure if you've ever heard these things, but they tell these stories where you're supposed to glean something from it. And his story of like, he's homeless and but he knows what he wants to do, and he just every day he's grinding and gets after it. But one of Watchmen on HBO. Did you ever watch that?
Yeah. Well, I've seen it. I'm familiar with it. It's not really my style, but I know about it.
Superhero like, yeah. So Game of Thrones, no.
So Game of Thrones is probably the only fantasy thing that I was into, and for me, the show stopped at season 7. So from season 7 before, I loved it, but
dude, I would say season 5. Season 6 and 7 are, I don't know.
That last season was just straight trash.
Oh my gosh, dude, I can't even believe it. But I do want to take some questions from these people that are here with us on the audience. So feel free to ask some questions. We'll get into that some more. Good. But I'm like wanting to get back to like more of this chatting and getting to know you a little bit more. So outside of coding, what are the things that you like doing? Are you an avid cooker? Obviously you make fried chicken. Do you still do that a lot? Or are you like out there? Do you play golf?
I tried to get into golf. That's not my thing. Like my in-laws are diehard into golf, and I've tried. I just can't get into it. But for me, I'll be honest, like I used to have a lot of hobbies, and now with my goals being where they are, it's so hard to find time for the things that I'm already doing, much less something on the side. So, and I don't advise that for a lot of people, but I'll admit I'm a workaholic. But it's because I know the tangible benefits of what I'm doing. Because and for example, just taking Twitter, for example, in March I had 300 followers. Right now I just crossed like 50,000, 51,000. And I literally within 90 days of being on Twitter, I had 30,000 followers. And I know people are gravitating to it. I don't necessarily care about the follower count, but I just use it as a metric of these are the people that are getting help. That follower count could go to 0 tomorrow and I wouldn't care.
How do you think that happened? Like, how'd you grow to 50,000? I mean, I see you have nearly 20,000 tweets, which is way more than I have, and probably a lot more than a lot of people do. So how do you grow to that scale?
So I will say for a lot of things, I hate social media. I'll be honest. Like, I really don't scroll social media. I just make my post focus on my little community, and that's about it. But for me, I only use LinkedIn. And I remember it wasn't until I was at a meetup where someone showed me in March, right before COVID hit, someone showed me about Twitter, like people in tech are on there sharing ideas. And I was like, oh, that's great. And for me, I didn't really see what I was looking for. Like when I was looking to learn how to code, like I think we can all agree social media is pretty damn toxic. And everyone is so negative on there. There's no real good ideas that are being shared. It's more along the lines of I'm flexing. Like, look at this bag I just bought. Look at this new car I got. Where's the post where it's amplifying and respecting the person that paid their light bill on time and didn't have a late fee? Or they paid their phone bill on time and the phone didn't get cut off, right? There's nothing like that. It's all like this toxic, like spend the most money, but you're alienating a good portion of the world. I wanted posts when I was learning how to code. And that was like, similar to like, okay, you can do this. Here are some steps that you can take to get to this point and stuff like that. Like job advice, career advice, just life advice in general. So I literally just started having a conversation with myself. And I started making posts that I was looking for. And to be honest, I didn't care if people like gravitated to it or not. I just said, I'm going to make these posts for a couple months and let's just see what happens. And in the beginning, I remember people like, what do you think? You're some like big shot talking like, you're like this motivational speaker or something like that. I'm a very big believer in your preparation will make way for your destination. I was making these posts because I knew what I wanted to hear. And so I started making these posts and from April 1st, in March, I had 300 followers. April 1st, I had 1,000. April 10th, I had 10,000. And like the posts just started picking up steam. And now, you can go all over tech Twitter and find some really positive posts, which I think, for the most part, I help push that narrative. And I feel like it's a lot more healthier of a place as compared to what it was before. But I'll say, I just started posting what I wanted to hear. Simple as that.
Sure.
I feel like a lot of people go on there and they want to share the food they want, or they want like to try and create some like viral random post or some engagement tweets. That's not the way to create a community or a message around you. But I remember in the beginning, people thought like, what are you talking about? Like you're some big shot. And now like, oh, you're so profound. It's the same thing I was saying before. Like you mocked it before, but now I'm profound because I have a follower count. The follower count doesn't equate to you being a better developer or something like that. It just means you know how to market yourself. Simple as that. But I'm glad that people find the value in it. And a lot of the times, like they're hearing things that they needed to hear, whether it's career-wise or just life-wise, and I'm a big believer in you need to prioritize yourself. And I feel like we don't put ourselves first. And I feel like, honest to God, we just don't ask ourselves the questions that we don't want to answer.
Sure.
And I feel like if you would just go in your room, turn off the lights, turn off the phone, put away the electronics, and just sit up on your bed for like 20 minutes, I guarantee you your mind's going to wander and you can ask yourself the question you don't want to answer. And you can find out what really makes you tick as a human being. And I guarantee you that one move alone will help produce so much value in your life because you're going to find out what you really want. Like, what do you really want? Like, do you want to make more in life? Do you want to make more? Do you want to buy a nice house? Do you want to buy a nice car? Do you want to provide for your wife and kids? What do you want? Like, what do you want? And once you know what you want, you can spend the rest of your natural life chasing after it. But you'll never do that unless you ask yourself the question you don't want to answer. And I feel like we don't ask ourselves the question because we're afraid of that answer.
Yeah. That's good.
All right.
Here you go. Here's a question that I want you to answer. How do you deal with interview rejections?
So For me, I feel like honestly, and I know it's a weird way to think about this, but they just did you probably one of the best favors. Like they removed themselves out of your way because you're headed to your dream job and they're just another obstacle. So why are you looking at that as a rejection? It was a learning experience. Take what you were inadequate in that interview, build upon it, and then when you get to that dream job, you can be a more valuable candidate.
Yeah, it really feels like to me that rejections show you a lot more than acceptance, right? So imagine if you did get that job that you were rejected from, and then you went into that job and you didn't perform to the level you should have. Now you're kind of stuck in this, like, am I going to get fired phase? And perhaps you will be. But the idea that this is just like a nice open book to you to say, hey, here's something you can learn from. And I would imagine, unless you're really not self-aware, I'd imagine that the vast majority of interviews, you'd be able to get something from that. You'd actually learn from the interview, leaving it regardless of what the outcome of the interview is. You should be like, oh, they asked me these few questions and I don't think I had a good answer for them, or I thought I had a really good answer for that. Maybe I didn't. Now I should actually go back and research some more related to that. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing. You don't want to go to an office. You want to do your job. How do you proceed from that? How do you get a remote job is kind of the question. I think, oh yeah, this guy had 2 in a row. So how do you get a remote job?
Okay, so I get asked this question a lot. I have a lot of international followers, and I find some. I try to find like really cool accounts from all over the world because number one, I like knowing what people are doing, but also like I'm a very big believer in your follower count doesn't equate to how good of a developer you are. So some people that have like 100 followers are like genius developers, and I want to know who this person is, right?
Sure.
So I try to find these accounts everywhere. But a lot of international people follow me, and I follow them, and they're talking about like how can I get a job in America? Well, right now, I'll be completely honest with you, it's definitely harder than it was in 2019. Because especially with COVID, a lot of these companies have had to basically like scale their entire operation that wasn't there before to be fully remote. And so now that they're actually thriving in it, their employees are remote in America. It definitely doesn't make it easier for you to try and get a job here, but also understand, 30 million Americans lost their jobs this year. A lot of developers lost their jobs this year. There's a lot more competition this year as opposed to last year. It doesn't mean you can't get a job. It just means that there's definitely some senior developers that decided to become mid-level developers just to get a job. There's definitely some mid-level developers that took some junior opportunities just to get a job. But
Sure.
Understand one thing, the way you're going to get a job in anywhere, whether it's remote, whether it's not remote, you need to be so valuable that they just can't say no. You need to be so damn good that they can't turn you down. Like you need to be so damn good that after the interview, the hiring manager's like, God, I can't turn him down. I gotta have him, right? You need to be so damn good that if you have a difficult name to pronounce, before the interview, they're like, how do you say this? And then after the interview, they're studying that name so they don't get it wrong. You need to be so damn good. They're like, there's no other candidate that I've seen that can bring the value this person brings. If you're that damn good, you will get a job. It's as simple as that. But if you go in again with the bare minimum, just knowing every single day someone's learning how to code somewhere in the world, right? Every single day, like there's thousands of people that are logging on free code camp for the first time. If you just know the same thing that they know and 1,000 other people are going after the same opportunity you're going after, and you have nothing to differentiate yourself besides your name or where you're located, that's not going to do you any favors. But if you know a little bit more, if you apply a little bit more technique, if you have a better project, if you have more networking, if you create a better network, I guarantee you more opportunities will fall into your lap.
Totally. There's a lot there. I think that's like worth repeating to themselves. Just rewind it back and get that. Even early on when you're talking about this again, we get the same questions over and over, which is a good time to reiterate it. You hit somebody at a different time. Sometimes it really resonates with them more. This is an interesting one. So do either of us play chess or encourage mind games? I'm assuming you mean like brain teasers, not mind games. That's different terminology here in the U.S. But Priyanash Singh, welcome, man. Good to see you. So what do you think? Do you play chess or any sort of brain teaser type games?
Yeah, I play chess for the enjoyment of chess, but not because I'm like, oh, this is going to make me smarter. Like I just enjoy the game of chess. I actually just did a show. Is the first time they ever did it. It was like their pilot episode where they were like developers playing chess and having an interview. And you know what? It's pretty fucking hard to get an interview going when you're trying to think of a move and not mess up at the same time. Sure. And I totally bombed both games, but it's on YouTube. You could check it out somewhere.
That is,
but
it's a clever way. Yeah,
it's just way too hard to try and have a conversation with everyone in the chat, make moves, don't mess up, and be entertaining at the same. Like it's just too much for the brain to compute, and especially because it's timed. So it's like you got like 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I'm like, there's no way you can do all of that in such a short period of time.
Yeah. I mean, I used to play chess a lot when I was younger. Something I also played when I was younger. I mean, I'm 33 as well. So when I say younger, it usually means like in my 20s or in my teens. I also played Call of Duty a lot, but in my 20s. But then in my teens, it was like, I don't know, Mario Kart and GoldenEye and 64, those sorts of things with friends and whatnot. But games now, to me, the games are figuring out software. You know, like I played The Sims 2 when I was like, I don't know, 12 years old, 13 years old. And when I was learning how to code, it actually really reminded me of playing The Sims because you're trying to figure out all of these things to maximize the game, right? And I really feel that way about software now, where it's like there's all of these challenges that are happening, but then you get that immediate feedback loop when you solve the software, even if you don't do it well necessarily. But that's like my game now. Priyanash, thanks for the question.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's like spending the time to play games is just not something I think is worth it right now. There's just too much stuff to do. I'd rather entertain myself by watching a TV show and not really be too engaged with it, but really just kind of zone out and be like, oh, this is relaxation, having beer with my wife, stuff like that.
You hit it on the head, and that's the same thing for me, and I love that. Like, for me, if I'm watching something, it's downtime. I don't want to think. I don't want to, like, my brain to be going. I want to go as close to being brain dead before I need a doctor as possible, right? Like, I just want to zone out. I don't want anything keeping me going. Just want to relax, and maybe I'll drift off. But for me, I value my time. I want to return on whatever time that I'm utilizing. Yeah. But I also value my family. So for me, if I'm spending time with my family, I don't want anything distracting me, and I try to find something that will keep me with them. Now, one thing I have started doing is I play Roblox with my son. He loves Roblox, and so we'll play Roblox together.
What's Roblox?
So it's like the ultimate like kids game where it's almost like Steam, and they have like a million games in there, and they're all like included. They're all free. But like if you got a kid, like I don't you have kids? You have kids, right?
I do. I have 2 kids, 3 and 1 though, so not quite.
So still young. Yeah. But like it's all touchscreen. It's on like your phone. You could use a computer, but on your phone they could play on it or tablet, and it's got literally like a million games in there, and they're all family-friendly games, nothing like to be worried about. So it's perfect to play with your kid and all the good stuff.
Is this it right here? No, that doesn't look.
No, that's Roadblock. It's ROBLOX.
ROBL. Roblox. Yeah. Oh, got it. I think you said Roadblocks.
Roblox. Like,
got it.
Here's another thing: as developers, like you can literally make games and you can monetize them on that platform. Like they have like a whole Roblox studio where you can make your own games, and like all the games are free to join, but like you have options to like buy better outfits or whatever it may be, or to buy some boost that doesn't affect your gameplay. And like kids, they want to look like the coolest characters, and there are literally people that have made millions of dollars off of Roblox.
Wow. Interesting. This looks pretty cool. Gonna have to check that out some more. I don't actually develop a whole lot for games. So have you ever like considered going into more IT, system admin, network engineering, stuff like that? Have you thought about that path at all?
So my plan this year was actually to start on cloud and DevOps stuff. I want to learn more about Docker, like the inner workings of it and things like that. And so when I was hired, I was a Java engineer. I was hired full stack. So my job was Java, SQL, and Angular. But we've decided to rewrite our entire code base to React and Go and MongoDB. So I've literally been learning everything for React and Go and all that. So all my plans got pushed back for sure. But AWS is like one of the first things I want to like kind of tackle on, and I do want to get more familiar with like Amplify and things like that as well, though.
Where are you hosting? Where's your company hosting right now with Go as a backend?
So right now we're using GCP and AWS for everything, but we're using both parties depending on what we're doing. And I do feel like we're gonna move everything to GCP. But you know, I like Go so far. Obviously, I'm still new to it because I was spearheading a project in our company, and I was literally like a one-man team, and we were doing everything in Java and Angular, and that's actually how I got like my last promotion. But for that, you know, I ended up being pushed back on learning like stuff like Kafka and all that good stuff, where everybody had more of a learning time. So I'm 6 weeks into it now, and I'm learning it all, and I'm absorbing it. But there's still some inner workings I want to figure out, as opposed to what we were doing before and the benefits. Like we just got what do you call it? Snowflake. And so now I'm like trying to learn how Snowflake works and like what's the benefit as opposed to something else. So it's all interesting stuff, and I'm enjoying it so far.
Yeah, Snowflake I haven't worked with a whole lot, but I think a friend of mine from college or high school actually works there as a sales rep, and it's like I think they're just blowing up right now. So it's definitely something to look into more myself, and hopefully everyone else does as well. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, another question here. How do you keep yourself focused for long hours?
I don't.
Yeah, you don't.
So I've realized for me, like some people can sit at a computer and code for 8 hours and never take a break. That's not me. So I'm more along the lines of like for every 25 minutes I got to take a break. But what I realized is when I do that, for those 25 minutes, and again, where I'm sitting now is my work area. Like this is where I do work. If I'm doing anything besides work, I move to my other computer because it's almost like a mental trigger. When I sit here, my brain flicks on. It's like a light switch. Okay, work has to be done here. But I realized like when I do that 25 minutes, I'm spitting straight production. Like I'm producing, and then I'll go take a 5-10 minute break, come back, and I'll do the same thing. That's just been the method that works for me. I don't know how some people sit for 4, 5, 6 hours and don't blink an eye away. I've got to take those mental breaks. But also I have like a whiteboard on my wall over here. So I like to sketch out the ideas. I try to break them down into little further, concepts. So then I can tackle one thing at a time in a methodical but productive way that produces the best possible outcome, as opposed to let's just try and attack this from anywhere and see what happens. So I just have to be laser focused.
Yeah. I mean, I will add my take on that. I think you need to find what works for you, of course. Obviously, you have, Danny. For me, I put these headphones on, put on music that I like listening to. Sometimes that's listening to like Hans Zimmer and Ramin Djawadi. Sometimes that's listening to rap. Sometimes it's rock. I mean, it's all over the board, but I get into the zone. You get in the zone in your studio. I get in the zone with these headphones and my laptop. I've been able to work for hours on end, but like actually moving around to get into the zone, I think is the key. And then there's this other really good thing called coffee.
Yeah.
Coffee really helps me get into the zone as well, and stay there.
Yeah. I'll say this, that like for me, I can't listen to music with words. And I've done it too many times now to where I'm like, I'm never changing because somehow or another, I start getting into the song and the lyrics end up in my code. And I don't realize I'm typing it. And then I'm like, why isn't this code running? And then I'm finding, music from Eminem or 50 Cent or somebody like that. And like, I've put that in my code. I'm definitely into rap in a huge way. Yeah. But for me, and I can, like, if I force myself, I can go for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. But I know what I produce in the first 25 minutes is more valuable than the 2 hours or 3 hours because my brain just starts drifting off. Or the other thing, I'll be honest, like I start feeling like I'm spinning in circles. And I feel like I'm over rereading everything. And it's like, where if I read code before and I'm like, oh, this is what's happening, I find myself like, is that what's happening? I start questioning myself. I don't feel like I'm super sharp. So when I walk away for even 5 minutes and I'll walk around the house, or like, especially now my son, he's in virtual school instead of real school because, school system here, all the schools are closed.
Yeah.
And that's like, oh, like I'll go like, hey, how you doing in class right now? Everything going good? You want something to drink? I'll check on him, and when I come back, it's like boom, producing. Then I'll go check on him again, joke around with my wife for a couple minutes, come back, I'm producing. Like those 25 minutes, I'll produce more value than anything else.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I have to. I mean, I do very similar things. I don't have to, but my kids are young, so they're definitely still here. There's no school. Maybe schools are in. I have no idea, at least in this area, but they're always here. So I go in and check in on them, play around with my little girls, and do those sorts of things as well. You definitely need to take breaks, especially like, I guess you were doing your coding journey and you were a father the whole time, right? So for me, I became a father after doing this for a while. So there was times where I would just post up at a coffee shop for like a 10-hour day, and it wasn't that big of a deal. I didn't really need all of those breaks, but as a father, you absolutely have to take those breaks to see your kids and play around and stuff like that. So,
I always talk about, like, honestly, I thought I had no time when I was single. And I look back like, what the fuck was I doing with my time now that I got a wife and a kid? Like, it's crazy. But honestly, you do have to make that time because, again, it's knowing your driving force, right? Like, for me, my reason for being, and I mean this, I would be nowhere without my wife and my son.
Yeah.
My wife was the one that saw something in me that I didn't see in me. She's the one that, if it wasn't for her, honestly, God, I'd probably still be at the gas station. I never would have thought about trying to do something better because from where I came from, making $400 a week was making it. Yeah. Making, minimum wage, but having a steady job, you're living the dream. You know, I wasn't in jail. I wasn't dead. Where I grew up was the worst part of Brooklyn. And like, I feel like that alone was an achievement. Forget all the rest.
Sure.
So for me to actually enter a life where I'm not only just helping myself and my family's in a much more comfortable position and we've got the nice cars and all that other good stuff, but helping others, I feel that was my calling in life and I just wish I knew it. But now I feel like the things that I'm doing, I don't monetize it. I don't ever ask anyone to pay me anything for getting them a job or anything. I always say, I want a reason to celebrate you. Just give me that reason. I don't care if you tell me like, hey, only way I'm going to get a job is if you buy me a cake when I get it. I'll buy a cake. I'll live stream it. I'll cut it. I'll eat it on live stream, whatever it takes. But if you get a job, I just want to celebrate you. I just need you to give me the reason to do it. As simple as that. I can talk to you, I can teach you, I can do whatever, but I can't understand it for you. The only way that's going to happen is if you put in the time to actually get there.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what is it that your wife said or did that really helped you reevaluate things?
She would always, like, she's like one of my biggest fans for the most part. And like, she's always seen something in me. And she's always said, well, you've got management material written all over you. You see things in a different way. Like, you weren't made to just fry chicken. And I believe that, like, my life wasn't brought to fruition to work at a gas station. That wasn't the extent of it. Like, I feel like a lot of us limit ourselves to these small holes because we think that's all we can do. Your life was brought to fruition to do amazing things, whether you realize that or not. You have an amazing skill set. Here's the thing. You're learning something right now that makes you so valuable, people are willing to pay 6 figures to get it. Like, you are valuable. Act like it.
Going back, though, I want to know, like, so other than being your fan, was there like a specific conversation she had with you, or was she just always like, Danny, you got to do something different, or Danny, I believe in you, like, make this happen, go do those classes, go to that meetup? Was it stuff like that, or how did it go?
When I first started learning, she didn't think it was viable. And she even said, like, I don't know how you can get into tech without a degree. But here's the thing. When I started learning, I didn't learn because, like, oh, I'm going to get this job as a developer. Yeah. I just said, I'm going to start learning. I'm going to make a website. It's going to be such a badass website that people all over the world are going to log into it. And I'm going to sell something there and it's going to make me rich. And I don't know what it is. I just know I'm going to make a site. And then you start learning about, like, ranking in Google and, like, Google searches. And you realize that people don't really find websites. There's millions in marketing behind it. But the goal was never, I need to make the site. It's just, to get a job. It's just, I want to make something. Yeah. And then through that, I started learning more and more and more. And then she started seeing the progress with the the community. But what really kicked it off for her, where she knew I was going to make it in tech, was when I helped the very first person land their first job in tech.
Sure.
And when I helped them land that first job, like, the rest was history. But I'll tell you, for a long time, I had imposter syndrome. I doubted myself. I was the butt of jokes. People call me Popeyes. I used to go to these job interviews and I'd be like, God damn it. Like, they don't want you, right? They don't want you. You smell like chicken. They know you smell like chicken. They know they want a professional. They want a developer. They don't want someone like you that just sits there frying chicken. They want a real developer. They want someone there. And I'm glad to say, my doubts, my imposter syndrome, my haters, I made it. I'm Danny Thompson and I'm a software developer and I'm doing the thing that I wanted to do.
That's awesome, man. I mean, my wife, whenever I have a challenging month, week, or day, it's always like, you'll figure it out. You always do. And that little bit of reassurance is like, you're right. And like a day later, a week later, sure enough, I figured it out. And she just smiles at me like, I told you.
Yeah. My wife is always right. I try not to tell her that, but she knows she's always right.
Yeah.
Right, I have to jump off.
Some sort of intuition they have. Yeah. All right. You got to run, man.
Cool. I got to run.
Yeah, dude, this was fun. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
I love this. I'll absolutely come back anytime you want me to. Just let me know and we'll do it again.
Thanks, Danny. Appreciate it. Thanks for everyone else coming out. I will chat with you guys soon. Have a good one.
Appreciate you, brother.
Bye.